There are nights when the world finally grows quiet, but your heart does not. The room is dark, the clock ticks softly, the body is exhausted, yet something inside remains awake, restless, unsettled. You turn from one side to the other, thinking maybe comfort will come from a new position, a deeper breath, a softer pillow. But the moment your head settles, the thoughts return, not loud, just persistent. A weight you cannot name, a tightness you cannot explain. It's a strange thing. The body feels tired, yet the heart refuses to sleep. You've prayed, you've read, you've remembered Allah with your tongue, and still the chest feels heavy, as if the soul is knocking from the inside, asking for something you haven't given it in a very long time. Everyone has experienced this in some form, the silent hours where the heart speaks the loudest. You don't hear words, yet you feel the message. Something is missing. But what is it? Why does a person repeat Allah's name with their tongue, yet still feel a storm inside? Why does someone recite powerful du'as, yet their heart feels hollow? Why does another person whisper just once, and the entire universe inside them softens? The paradox is real, and it is not new. Ibn Arabi spoke of this mystery centuries ago when he said, "The same verse becomes light for the believer and a veil for the heedless." The words of remembrance may be the same, but the place they land within you, that is what makes them alive or empty. Picture two people standing side by side. Both say Allah. Both move their lips. Both exhale the same sound into the air, yet one feels a wave of peace brushing over the heart, and the other feels nothing at all. How can the same remembrance enter two hearts and awaken only one? The answer does not begin with the tongue, it begins with the soul. The human being is a layered creation, a body that grows tired and a soul that remains thirsty. And while we feed our bodies every day in small rituals of nourishment, breakfast, lunch, tea, dinner, most of us go years without feeding the soul even once, so it begins to cry, quietly, not in words, but in the language of restlessness, a tight chest, a wandering mind, a subtle heaviness that clings even when life is peaceful from the outside. What you feel at night when everything is quiet is not anxiety alone. Sometimes it is your soul reminding you that it is starving. Your heart is not empty because something is wrong with you. It is empty because it has been nourished with everything except what it was created for. We live in a world where the body gets all the attention. We pamper it, decorate it, comfort it. We chase entertainment for the mind, distractions for the eyes, pleasures for the senses. But for the soul, the quiet, glowing center of the human being, we offer almost nothing. And then we wonder why our remembrance feels dry. You cannot expect the tongue to awaken what the heart has forgotten for years. This is where the journey of real dhikr begins. Not with sound, but with sincerity. Not with the lips, but with the inner world waiting behind them. Because somewhere deep within you, a part of you still remembers the moment before this world, the moment when every soul testified, "You are our Lord." That memory is not erased, it is only sleeping. And the restlessness you feel, it is the soul asking for the dhikr that awakens it. In this journey, we will uncover what kind of remembrance truly feeds the soul. The dhikr that doesn't just move the tongue, but revives the heart. Every human being lives with two bodies, though most people recognize only one. There is the body you can see, made of skin, bone, appetite, and habit. And then There is the body you cannot see, the luminous breath of Allah's command, the subtle presence inside you that has no weight, no color, and yet feels everything. We spend our entire lives taking care of the first body. We wake up and stretch it. We shower it. We feed it whenever it becomes hungry. We rest it when it becomes tired. Every day is a ritual of attending to its needs. But the second body, the soul, is left wandering like a child who has been forgotten in a crowded marketplace. And when the soul is neglected for too long, it begins to express its hunger through the only language it knows: restlessness, heaviness, emptiness. Think of the human being as a garden. The body is like the soil. It holds structure, form, and limits. But the soul is the seed buried within it. You can water the soil 1,000 times, but if you never nourish the seed, it will never grow. This is the condition of most modern hearts. We water the surface, we polish the exterior, but the seed, the inner being, remains dry. People think they are broken. People think something is wrong with their faith. People think they are falling behind spiritually because they don't feel what others feel when remembering Allah. But the truth is simpler and far more compassionate. Your soul is starving, and no amount of worldly achievement can replace the nourishment it was designed for. Consider this: a plant does not survive on water alone. It needs sunlight, the very thing it was created to grow toward. A bird cannot live in a cage with unlimited food. It suffocates without air and sky. A fish cannot thrive on land, even if you feed it the finest meals. Everything has a nourishment that matches its origin. The body comes from clay, so it finds comfort in food, warmth, sleep, and touch. But the soul comes from the breath of Allah, so its nourishment is remembrance of the one it came from. This is why nothing in the world fully satisfies the human heart. You can give a person wealth, but their soul still hungers. You can give them success, but their inner world still trembles. You can give them companionship, yet loneliness still visits them when the night grows quiet. The soul does not hunger for these things. The soul hungers for what it was created to carry: closeness, presence, knowing, remembrance. Ibn Arabi wrote that the soul carries memories older than time, memories from before birth, memories of standing before the divine. But those memories are buried beneath the noise of worldly life. They cannot rise unless the heart is awakened. Every day we feed our body multiple times. But when was the last time you fed your soul? Not with a rushed dua, not with mechanical repetition, not with words spoken without intention, but truly fed it with presence, with breath, with remembrance that flows from the deepest place inside you. A person who has not fed their soul will feel it. It shows up in the small moments of life. You wake up tired even after a full night's sleep. You sit among people, yet feel alone. You achieve a goal, yet feel nothing change inside. You pray, but sense a gap between the words in your heart. These are not signs of failure, they are signs of hunger, and no soul can be nourished by anything except what matches its nature: remembrance rooted in sincerity and presence. Soon, we will uncover the difference between dhikr, that moves the tongue, and dhikr, that nourishes the soul. But before that distinction becomes meaningful, you must understand one simple truth. Your soul is not weak. It's not defective. It's not lost. It is simply waiting to be fed. Most people believe that remembrance begins with the lips. They imagine that by repeating Allah's name over and over, peace will naturally descend. And yes, the tongue is a noble servant. It carries the sound of His name into the air, letting creation bear witness to your devotion. But the soul does not eat sound. The soul eats presence. There are people who say Allah 1,000 times and feel nothing shift inside, and there are others who breathe His name once, quietly, inwardly, and suddenly their heart feels like a window opening to the dawn. How can the same word produce such different realities? The answer lies in where the remembrance begins. Tongue dhikr begins at the surface. Heart dhikr begins at the center. Tongue dhikr moves outward, into sound, into motion, into the environment. Heart dhikr moves inward, into stillness, into presence, into the secret place where the soul lives. Imagine a man sitting in his home after a long day. He is tired, frustrated, weighed down by events he cannot control. He takes his prayer beads and begins repeating Allah's name. His lips move quickly, his fingers move faster, but his heart feels locked behind a thick door. When he finishes, he feels exactly how he felt before, perhaps even more exhausted. Now imagine another person. Her day was also heavy, her burdens no less real. But before she begins her dhikr, she closes her eyes and allows herself to exhale the weight from her chest. She places her attention gently on the space behind her heart, and with her next breath, she whispers Allah's name, not loudly, not with force, but with sincerity. In that moment, the name falls inward like a drop of water reaching thirsty soil, and something inside her softens. The difference is not in the sound. The difference is in the place the remembrance touches. The Sufi masters understood this deeply. Sultan Bahu said, "Dhikr of the tongue feeds the tongue. Dhikr of the soul feeds the soul." And Ibn Arabi wrote, "Remembrance is not in movement of the tongue, but in presence of the heart." The human heart is a mysterious realm. It is not simply an organ pumping blood. It is the throne of spiritual perception, the gateway between the physical and the unseen. The tongue can only knock at its door, but the heart is where the divine name lives. This is why so many people become discouraged in spiritual life. They mistake movement for awakening. They mistake repetition for remembrance. They mistake sound for nourishment. True dhikr is not measured by how many times the tongue recites, but by how deeply the heart receives. Ask yourself, when you remember Allah, where does the remembrance land? On your lips? On your mind? Or inside that quiet chamber deep within, the place that opens only when sincerity enters? There are people who speak loudly of Allah while living with a dry heart, and there are people whose lips remain silent, yet their entire being whispers His name with every breath. This is not to diminish the dhikr of the tongue. It is a doorway, but a doorway that leads inward, and if one never walks through it, they remain standing outside the house of their own spirit. The path of the heart begins when the seeker recognizes that the soul cannot be reached through noise. It must be reached through presence, stillness, breath. Soon, we will explore how the breath itself becomes dhikr, how each inhalation and exhalation can carry the remembrance of Allah directly into the core of your being. But for now, hold this truth gently. The tongue calls out to Allah. The heart replies to Him. There is a secret doorway inside every human being, a bridge between body and soul that most people cross every second without ever realizing its power. It is the breath. Think about it. Before you spoke your first word, before you opened your eyes to the world, before you recognized your parents, the very first thing you did was inhale. And when your time in this world ends, the last thing you will do is exhale. Between these two breaths lies your entire life, your joys, your fears, your successes, your sins, your awakenings, your silence, your repentance, your hope. Everything you have ever lived happened between two breaths. So how can breath be ordinary? The Quran tells us that Allah breathed into Adam from His command, not from His essence, not from His being, but from His command. This divine command is the spark inside every human, the hidden current that animates the soul. Every breath you take is a reminder of that origin. Every inhalation whispers, "You came from Him." Every exhalation whispers, "And to Him you will return." This is why Sufi sages have always seen the breath as more than a physical rhythm. It is the rope tying the seen world to the unseen. A person may say Allah's name with their tongue and feel nothing. But when they synchronize the name with the breath, something begins to change, slowly, gently, but undeniably. Consider a simple moment. A man walking home at sunset after a long day. His mind is heavy, his heart carrying worries too tangled to express. Yet as he walks, he becomes aware of his breathing, the rise and fall of his chest, the coolness of the evening air brushing the inside of his lungs. Without even planning it, he thinks of Allah in the rhythm of his steps. His exhale becomes a quiet La, his inhale a soft Allah. And for the first time that day, he feels a space inside him open. No dramatic revelation, no mystical vision, just a small, sincere softening, the kind that reminds a person that Allah is near. Sufi masters taught that dhikr tied to breath is not a ritual. It is a return. It is not about creating a new spiritual state. It is about uncovering the one that already lives inside you. Because while the mind may wander and the tongue may tire, the breath never stops moving. It is the most faithful companion you have in this life. Ibn Arabi describes the breath as the subtle wind through which meanings enter the heart. Breath is not merely oxygen. It is awareness. It is presence. It is the gatekeeper of intention. When the divine name begins to ride upon this wind, the soul hears it more clearly than anything the ears could ever perceive. Every breath becomes a message. Every heartbeat becomes an echo. Every moment becomes a meeting. You may not realize it, but your breath has been calling you your entire life, calling you back to calm, calling you back to presence, calling you back to the one who shaped your chest and placed movement inside it. This is why the early Sufis would say, dhikr spoken loudly reaches others. Dhikr whispered reaches yourself. But dhikr tied to breath reaches the soul. It is through the breath that remembrance becomes live. It is through the breath that the heart begins to unclench. It is through the breath that the inner world finally awakens after years of silence. And it is through the breath that the seeker begins to approach the secret dhikr. The remembrance connected not to attributes, but to the divine essence itself. Among all the names of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, the wise, the majestic, there is one name that stands apart from the rest, not because it is louder, not because it is more dramatic, but because it belongs to His very essence. It is the name Allah, Ism al-Dat, the name that contains all other names within it. Every attribute points to a quality. But this name points to the one beyond all qualities. This is why the soul responds to it in a way the mind cannot fully explain. Because when the heart whispers this name, it is not learning something new. It is remembering something ancient. Long before your first breath, long before your first fear, long before your first heartbreak, your soul stood before Allah in a realm where time had not yet begun. And in that moment, your soul testified, "You are our Lord." That memory is older than your body, older than your name, older than the world you live in now. So when a person slowly breathes and lets the name Allah settle inside the heart, they are not merely reciting, they are returning. This is the secret of dhikr connected to the essence, the remembrance that does not travel outward into sound, but inward into the core of your being. Sufi sages described it in a simple way. The tongue says Allah once. The heart repeats it thousands of times. Not because the heart moves, but because every cell, every pulse, every subtle layer of your existence echoes the name in its own language. Consider a woman who wakes before dawn. Her home is quiet, the world still dark, the air cool. She sits with her back straight, her hand resting lightly on her chest. She closes her eyes, inhales deeply, and then, with the softest intention, she whispers the name Allah inwardly, not with sound, but with presence. In that moment, something hidden inside her stirs, a silence filled with meaning, a warmth without heat, a calm that feels like recognition. This gentle awakening is the beginning of nourishment. You see, when the name Allah is recited with the tongue, it creates a sound. But when it is recited with the breath and settled into the heart, it creates life. This was the wisdom behind what many saints taught, that the most potent dhikr is the one that travels with the rhythm Allah placed inside you, the heartbeat. The heart beats without asking your permission. It moves without your effort. It pulses by His command alone. And when you synchronize the divine name with this rhythm, silently, inwardly, sincerely, the spiritual world begins to open in quiet, steady ways, not through visions, not through supernatural displays, but through presence. Allah has created a world inside you, a world of lights, a world of subtle energies, a world of inner perception waiting for nourishment. When the name Allah enters this world through the breath, through the heart, it is like rainfall reaching dry soil. The soul does not rise in a sudden fountain. It rises slowly, like dawn spreading across the horizon, gradual, gentle, inevitable. And that rise is the first sign that the dhikr you are practicing is not merely repetition. It is nourishment. Many people search for dramatic spiritual experiences. They want something extraordinary, something overwhelming, something that proves they are making progress. But the saints always said the greatest miracles happen quietly. A heart that softens, a mind that becomes clear, a soul that finally feels at home. This is the fruit of dhikr of the essence, not spectacle, but awakening. And once this awakening begins, a person must understand the structure Allah placed within them, the inner centers, the subtle layers, the hidden faculties that respond to divine remembrance like flowers opening to rain. It is time to explore the realms inside you that dhikr can awaken. If you were to look at the human being only through physical eyes, you would see a body made of organs, bones, muscles, nerves, all of them visible, measurable, predictable. But the soul does not live in this outer architecture. The soul inhabits a far more delicate landscape, one woven with light instead of flesh, perception instead of tissue. The Sufi masters call these subtle layers latā'if, inner centers, spiritual faculties, windows through which divine meaning enters the human heart. Think of them as the senses of the soul. Just as your physical eyes see colors and shapes, your inner eye sees meaning. Just as your ears hear sound, your inner hearing perceives guidance. Just as your nerves feel touch, your inner being feels nearness, distance, openness, and constriction. Most people live their entire lives sensing the world only through the physical body, unaware that an entire universe inside them lies dormant, not because it is absent, but because it has not been fed. These subtle faculties awaken only through nourishment that matches their nature, and nothing nourishes them like the remembrance of the divine essence. When the dhikr Allah enters the chest, softly, sincerely, it does not stop at the physical heart. It travels inward, layer by layer, illuminating the inner centers that have been asleep since childhood. The first center is the qalb, the subtle heart, the place of emotion, intuition, and the first stirrings of presence. This is where most seekers begin. This is where heaviness lifts, tears fall, and softness returns. Deeper still lies the ruh, the spirit, the region of longing, awareness, and connection to the divine breath that brought you into existence. When the ruh awakens, a person begins to notice signs around them. Small synchronicities, gentle openings, moments of clarity they never saw before. Beyond the ruh is the sir, the secret, a realm of inner knowing, subtle understanding, the quiet whisper that guides without sound. Many people call it intuition, but the Sufis know it as a light placed directly by Allah in the heart of the believer. Deeper still is the kafi, the hidden, home to the beginnings of spiritual witnessing, not with the eyes, but with the inner being. This is the realm where a person begins to understand themselves in ways they never could through intellect alone. And at the deepest point is the akfa, the most hidden, the innermost chamber of the soul, a place touched only by the light of divine presence, a place that remains veiled even from the person themselves until the heart has been purified through sincere remembrance. These are not imaginary realms. They are not esoteric fantasies. They are as real as breath, as real as conscience, as real as the quiet voice inside you that calls you toward goodness, even when no one is watching. When a person engages in the dhikr of the essence, silently, inwardly, with breath and heart aligned, these centers begin to awaken one after another, not in dramatic bursts, but in gentle unfoldings. You feel it when a moment that once triggered anger now triggers reflection. You feel it when sorrow no longer overpowers you as quickly as it once did. You feel it when you begin to understand why something happened in your life, when before it only confused you. You feel it when your prayers gain depth, when your tears finally carry meaning, when your heart begins to recognize Allah in the small details of your day. This is the nourishment your soul has been waiting for. Not loud chanting, not mechanical repetition, but a remembrance that flows from your breath into your inner being, touching places inside you that worldly life can never reach. Ibn Arabi wrote, "When the inner self awakens, the outer world becomes a mirror of truth, because once these inner centers begin to receive light, you no longer see the world with the same eyes. You no longer react with the same impulses. You no longer feel trapped in the same heaviness. A new journey begins, not outward, but inward. And as the soul awakens from within, a person slowly enters the stages the Sufis speak of, stations of clarity, nearness, witnessing, and inner transformation. This unfolding is the next step. When the soul begins to awaken, it does not announce itself with lightning or visions. It arrives softly, like dawn entering a dark room, not by force but by presence. Most people expect spiritual awakening to feel dramatic, overwhelming, supernatural. But the greatest openings rarely come with noise. They come with understanding. They come with clarity. They come with a quiet shift inside the heart that only the person themselves can feel. The first sign of awakening is lightness, a subtle release in the chest, as if someone loosened a knot you had been carrying for years. You may not know when it happened. You may not know why. But you suddenly breathe differently. The breath sinks deeper. The heart feels less crowded. This is the soul's first taste of nourishment. Then comes clarity, not the kind that solves every problem instantly, but the kind that lets you see your life from a higher viewpoint. Things that were tangled begin to make sense. Moments that once felt unfair begin to show their wisdom. You start noticing how every event, even the painful ones, have been quietly shaping your inner world. Awakening also brings patience, a deep, calm patience that comes not from discipline, but from trust. A father who once reacted with anger now pauses before speaking. A mother who carried years of silent stress now exhales before responding. A young man who used to drown in worry now finds himself accepting what he cannot control. These changes are not personality shifts. They are signs that the nafs is losing its grip and the heart is taking its rightful place. The Sufis call this transformation tazkiyah, the purification of the inner self. It is not a sudden break from who you were, but a gradual return to who you were always meant to be. Another sign of awakening is heightened awareness, subtle, soft, but unmistakable. You begin to sense when a decision will bring peace and when it will bring regret. You feel a quiet pull toward what is right, without needing to force yourself. You notice signs in your daily life, not supernatural miracles, but meaningful patterns, gentle nudges, small coincidences that feel purposeful. This is the Sir, the secret inner faculty, beginning to shine. Then comes closeness, qurb, a feeling of nearness to Allah that doesn't depend on external circumstances. Even when you are alone, you don't feel abandoned. Even when you are silent, you don't feel empty. Even when life is difficult, you feel held. This nearness is not emotional warmth. It is an inner stability, a heart anchored in remembrance, a soul resting in the presence of the one it has always known. And then for some, Allah grants witnessing, mushahada, not visions of unseen beings, not colors or lights, but a deep awareness that everything around you carries His fingerprint. A leaf falling, a child laughing, a change in the wind, all of it reminds you of Him. Ibn Arabi described this as the moment when the world becomes transparent, when the signs point so clearly to their Creator that the heart can no longer deny what it sees. But the most profound transformation of all is character, because real spirituality is not measured by what you feel, but by what you become. You begin to forgive more easily. You feel less threatened by other people's flaws. You stop arguing to prove yourself. You listen more. You soften. You begin to prefer gentleness over victory, silence over pride, compassion over judgment. And this is when the Hadith Qudsi becomes real in your life. When my servant draws near to me, I become his hearing with which he hears, his sight with which he sees. It doesn't mean a person becomes infallible. It means their inner being aligns with the divine names. Their sight seeks truth. Their hearing seeks wisdom. Their hands do good. Their feet avoid harm, not because they force themselves, but because the soul has awakened. And the path toward Allah becomes the path of ease. This is the fruit of dhikr that nourishes the soul, a transformation that begins within and flows outward, touching every part of your life. And when a person reaches this state, they do not become detached from the world. They become more present within it. The awakened soul becomes a source of mercy. When the soul awakens, a person does not suddenly glow with miracles or speak with thunder in their voice. The transformation is quieter than that, but far more powerful. You begin to notice it first in the way you carry yourself. The world feels lighter on your shoulders, not because your burdens disappeared, but because your heart has learned how to hold them differently. There is a dignity in your steps, a serenity in your presence, a calm that others feel before they even know your name. Your family begins to sense it. The way you speak becomes slower, gentler, more thoughtful. Where once irritation rose quickly, now patience appears without effort. A child drops something, and instead of frustration, you feel compassion. A spouse speaks with worry, and instead of reacting, you listen. This is the fruit of an awakened heart. Not power, not spectacle, but mercy. The Prophet Muhammad described the believer as a source of comfort, a person whose presence brings goodness wherever they go. When the soul is nourished, this becomes effortless, not a performance, not a spiritual personality, but the natural fragrance of a purified heart. You begin to notice that people feel safe opening up to you. They speak about their worries, their struggles, their hopes. Not because you offer perfect solutions, but because your presence itself carries calm. This is a sign that the divine quality of Rahmah, mercy, has begun to reflect through you. Even in moments of conflict, you find yourself choosing silence over anger, stillness over reaction, not because you suppress your emotions, but because the heart, once flooded with remembrance, no longer gets tossed around by every wave. A nourished soul becomes like deep water. The surface may ripple, but the depth remains still. The awakening also changes your vision, not what your eyes see, but how your heart interprets what you see. A hardship is no longer a punishment. It becomes a lesson. A delay is no longer a rejection. It becomes a redirection. A loss is no longer emptiness. It becomes space for something new. You start recognizing Allah's subtle care in moments you once dismissed as coincidence. And slowly, without forcing anything, you become someone who lifts others simply by being present. Your smile becomes lighter. Your silence becomes meaningful. Your words become fewer but deeper. This is the unseen transformation the Sufis spoke of. A human being who moves through the world quietly, yet leaves behind traces of peace wherever they pass. The nourished soul does not escape the world. It beautifies it. In the end, all of this returns to one simple truth. The secret dhikr that feeds the soul is not hidden in distant heavens, nor locked behind rituals reserved for saints. It is hidden in the breath you take every moment. It is hidden in the heart that beats inside your chest. It is hidden in the name you were created to remember, the name your soul recognized long before you entered this world. When you whisper Allah inwardly, with presence, with sincerity, with breath, something ancient inside you begins to awaken. Not all at once, not with fireworks, but with the quiet certainty of dawn spreading across a dark horizon. This is how the heart is nourished. This is how the soul returns home. And perhaps the most important question is this: have you ever felt a small moment, a softness in your chest, a sudden calm, a brief clarity that made you wonder if your soul was remembering something deeper? If a moment like that has ever touched you, share it in the comments. Your reflection might be the reminder someone else needs today. Before you leave, remember to like this video, subscribe to Voice of Sufism, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss these journeys of the heart. And now, explore the other videos appearing on your screen. Continue the journey inward. May your breath be remembrance, and may your heart be light.